Revealed: how a millionaire's incredible act of kindness transformed his maid's life with just $8. Martha stood in the grand sitting room, surrounded by exquisite art pieces that seemed to mock her worn-out scrubs. She inhaled the lavender-scented spray, suppressing a cough that had become all too familiar. For years, she dedicated herself to the sprawling home of Jonathan Green, a millionaire whose empire dwarfed her existence. Every day was a relentless cycle of dusting and scrubbing, but today the sweat clung to her forehead, her body finally protesting against years of neglect. She could feel shadows creeping into her vision as a wave of dizziness rolled through her. What if this was the day she collapsed? The thought gripped her heart like an icy fist. The rent, her mother's medical bills, the groceries for her children. The weight of it all had become unbearable. Martha's fingers trembled as she dusted a delicate sculpture. She had already abandoned her dreams of being an artist and a storyteller to survive. Now she felt the person she might have been slipping away. The fear of poverty gnawed at her insides. The love she had once held for creativity felt like a distant memory, a requiem for a life she never had the chance to live. Just then, Jonathan walked in unexpectedly, his tailored suit contrasting sharply with her faded attire. She straightened, heart racing. What if he saw her vulnerable, experiencing this dizzying tableau? She could already picture the trajectory of his disdain, or worse, indifference. Panic twisted her stomach as she struggled to regain composure. But the moment he met her gaze, everything changed. She could see the confusion in his eyes morph into curiosity. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern lacing his voice. His existence felt like an impenetrable wall, built to shield him from such common woes. Yet here he was, standing face to face with disappointment and desperation embodied. She had always kept her troubles hidden, but faced with his warmth, the dam began to crack. "It's nothing, sir," she managed, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "It's not nothing, Martha. You look unwell," he pressed, stepping closer. Suddenly, all her fears collided in a cacophony. A world where he might actually care felt impossible. Did it matter if he cared? Would he help? Or did he listen merely out of obligation? A million thoughts crashed together as she fought to keep her composure. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now, let's continue. Just as quickly as he had appeared, Jonathan's demeanor shifted. A flicker of understanding passed over his face, and Martha held her breath. What if he was willing to reach beyond his world, to engage with hers? Her heart raced wildly. If he decided to help, would she risk hoping for anything more? The tension settled heavily between them, a chasm stationed by class and fear. What if this $8 was just the beginning of something that could truly change everything? He questioned softly. The weight of his inquiry hung thick in the air, but how could she believe in promises from a man as privileged as him? As her pulse quickened, the horizon of possibility loomed larger, yet held shadows of doubt. The uncertainty of his intentions gnawed at her insides. What would it mean for them both? With the walls creeping closer, the world around her faded. Her fate teetered precariously on the edge of a decision she had no idea how to face. Martha felt her heart thunder in her chest, a rapid pulse that seemed to echo the chaotic emotions surging within her. The gravity of Jonathan's question lingered, tethering her to a moment where dreams and reality clashed. She caught a glimpse of herself reflected in the ornate mirror behind Jonathan, a ghost of the vibrant artist she used to envision becoming. Instead, here she stood, confined by the present and battling the fears of tomorrow. "Change?" she murmured, testing the word. It felt foreign and heavy on her tongue, as if it implied an odyssey far beyond the confines of her daily grind. A lifetime of hopes suffocating in the darkness of her scrubs and an overburdened heart flashed before her, each of her dreams stifled by necessity and obligation. Jonathan watched her, and for the first time she allowed herself to see through his lens. He was a man molded by privilege, and though she'd spent years in his shadow, maybe they shared a commonality, a yearning for more. His worry for her sparked a flicker of possibility deep within, igniting long-forgotten aspirations. What if she took a step, however small, toward reclaiming the artist hiding inside? "Sir, the words stuck, catching in her throat. Would he see her hesitation as weakness? Would her vulnerability shatter the fragile connection forming between them? It's not that simple." Jonathan leaned closer, his intensely focused gaze compelling her to confront her own trepidation. "It can be simple if you let it be, Martha. You have talents. The world deserves to see them. You deserve to share who you are, not just as my maid, but as an individual." His insistence washed over her in waves of warmth. Talents? The word stirred her core, reviving echoes of brushstrokes and ink on paper, the very act of creating that was left to gather dust in the forgotten corners of her mind. But could it really unfold like that? Could she truly embark on a path when she was anchored down by her responsibilities? "Sir, the words stuck, catching in her throat. Would he see her hesitation as weakness? Would her vulnerability shatter the fragile connection forming between them? It's not that simple." Jonathan leaned closer, his intensely focused gaze compelling her to confront her own trepidation. "It can be simple if you let it be, Martha. You have talents. The world deserves to see them. You deserve to share who you are, not just as my maid, but as an individual." His insistence washed over her in waves of warmth. Talents? The word stirred her core, reviving echoes of brushstrokes and ink on paper, the very act of creating that was left to gather dust in the forgotten corners of her mind. But could it really unfold like that? Could she truly embark on a path when she was anchored down by her responsibilities? The walls of the room tightened around her, bright colors and textures becoming blurs of anxiety. "I can't." The words escaped her in a trembling whisper. "I have children to support. I have bills to pay. I can't chase after dreams when there's so much at stake." "I understand what's at risk," Jonathan said softly, frustration sparking behind his composure. "But what kind of life are you giving your children if you give up on what makes you happy? There's always a way forward." His words weren't just encouragement. They were an invitation to dare to look beyond her current existence. A flicker of rebellion sparked. Could her awakening be simultaneous to a requiem for her past? Perhaps it was time to renew her commitment to her own aspirations. She thought about how she once found solace in storytelling, in painting her emotions, expressing them on canvas untouched. "I want to believe you, but I need to know how." The fear in her voice had morphed into something stronger, a determination echoing through her vulnerability. "Let's start with that small step then." Jonathan's eyes glimmered with encouragement. As the tension briefly eased, Martha felt the cusp of a transformation awaiting her decision. The pursuit of change was no longer an abstract idea floating in isolation. It loomed ahead, tangible and demanding. She was poised at a crossroads, trembling yet resolute. What if venturing forth meant rediscovering her voice? What if she uncovered untapped reservoirs of creativity? More pressing still, what if pursuing what made her whole became a shared journey with Jonathan, an unexpected ally? Then let's take that step together, she breathed, suddenly electrified by the prospect. But just as quickly as hope ignited, doubt clawed to the fore. The possibilities unraveled into uncertainties that laid bare the risk. Was Jonathan's offer genuine, or were the strings of privilege entwined in motives she couldn't quite grasp? The moment hung, suspended between possibilities and the pull of fear. It deepened the chasm, but above it hung the tantalizing promise of her long-lost self, the artist she thought she would never become. What would be the cost of her next choice? The crossroads remained before her, with one path leading back to comfort and another toward potential chaos. Martha braced for the unknown, poised to confront not just her fears, but the very essence of who she was. And just as clarity flickered, a new shadow loomed. What unexpected challenges lay ahead as she embraced her latent artistry? The following days felt surreal to Martha. Each morning, as she donned her scrubs, brief moments of anxiety were punctuated by flashes of inspiration. She stood at the edge of a precipice, her past whispering to confine her within familiar bounds, while an unfamiliar voice urged her forward. Shadows of self-doubt slithered around her, but the revelations sparked by Jonathan flickered incessantly in her mind. Their conversations had shifted. She sought them out now, testing ideas and expressing desires that had lain dormant for years. Together, they explored colors, forms, and concepts, igniting fragments of her imagination that lay buried within the mundane routines of her life. With each shared exchange, Martha felt emboldened. But there were questions that haunted her. Would she be able to navigate the tides of this newfound vulnerability? Was this realm of artistry worth the pursuit, layered as it was with uncertainty? One evening, while gathering her children's homework and preparing dinner, the weight of her dual existence bore down on her. The juxtaposition of the vibrant conversations with Jonathan and the grind of her day-to-day life shocked her into introspection. In the blend of crayon-scribbled notes and clattering pots, Martha whispered to herself, "What if I never try?" The kitchen, typically a space resonating with the happy chaos of her children's laughter, now felt stifling. As she arranged the vegetables, a storm brewed internally. A part of her fought valiantly for the mundane, arguing the safety it provided, the steady income, and the reassurance for her family. But another part, perhaps the part that had flickered to life during those discussions with Jonathan, craved emancipation from the norm. Later that week, Jonathan suggested an afternoon at a local art gallery. The invitation seemed simple, yet it was laden with layers of significance. It represented a step beyond words, an experience where hope could flutter and unfold within an inspiring atmosphere. "Let's explore together and see what stirs your creativity," Jonathan encouraged, his presence both reassuring and intimidating. Martha hesitated, trembling at the thought of stepping into a world where she would be seen as more than just a domestic worker. Wild fears danced in her mind. Would she be judged, or worse, would she revel in an environment where others seemed so effortlessly at ease with their artistry? "Is this really what I want?" she muttered to herself the night before their visit. It felt frivolous in a life tethered by responsibilities. Yet, recalling her childlike joy at creating, she countered that argument. Was it possible that this outing could push her closer to the artist she once dreamed of becoming? As the day approached, a critical realization began to dawn on her. This wasn't merely about art. It was about her agency and the reclamation of her identity. She had lived too long cloaked in self-neglect, and it was time for her to rise beyond the label of maid and into the realm of artist. With Jonathan by her side, she felt a faint but vital current of confidence ignite within her. She could shed the shadows of anonymity, embracing her own uniqueness. But was she truly ready to face the world outside? The lure of safety was tempting, yet it was overshadowed by the pressing desire to seize this opportunity. When they finally arrived at the gallery, a vivid explosion of color and creativity greeted her like an embrace. Each piece told a story, resonated with an emotion she longed to express. As they meandered through the exhibits, Martha felt the weight of external scrutiny melt away. Jonathan's admiration fueled her courage. The world began to shimmer with possibilities she had once deemed unattainable. But as they approached the last section of the gallery, a piece caught her breath, a dramatic painting that seemed to pulse with life. The artist's name tag reflected a familiar journey, perhaps even one parallel to her own. Could it be that every artist had once stood at the same precipice? Just as doubt began to creep back in, Jonathan turned to her, eyes gleaming with inquisitiveness. "What do you see, Martha?" he asked, challenging her to articulate her thoughts. The question hung in the air, profound yet daunting. Martha's heart thudded heavily in her chest. The moment felt pivotal, pregnant with significance. What would her answer reveal about her growth, about her right to claim this journey? And then the universe conspired. Something deep inside stirred, a voice clearer than ever before, urging her to speak. As she opened her mouth to respond, she could almost taste the future, promising yet uncertain, brimming with raw potential. What awaited her was not just about the art on the walls, but a confrontation with her own evolving identity and the unfolding adventure that loomed before her. Would she finally embrace her aspirations, or would old fears wrap around her ankle like a chain? The answer hung tantalizingly close, as did Jonathan's hopeful gaze, and the anchored weight of an unresolved question. What awaited her if she dared to take that leap? The air in the gallery pulsed with anticipation, each heartbeat syncing with the surges of color around her. The thick brushstrokes on the canvas beckoned to Martha, speaking to a part of her that had long been hushed. She was about to take a step that could unravel the tightly woven fabric of her life, but this moment was too significant to suppress. "Art is an expression of one's soul," she finally replied, her voice quivering but resolute. "This painting, it's raw and unrefined, yet it feels so alive. It reminds me of the struggles I face every day, the push and pull between what is expected of me and what I feel inside." The admission surged through her like a tidal wave, a cathartic release that surprised even herself. "We all have that tension," Jonathan noted, eyes focused, his sincerity illuminating the space between them. "What do you want to express, Martha?" The weight of that question lingered in the air, challenging her to confront the depths of her own aspirations. Martha shivered, the gravity of the moment anchoring her feet to the ground. She had lived in the shadows, molded by roles defined by others. But here, surrounded by art, she was finally standing in a glorious, messy truth. "I want to create," she whispered. The words felt like a revelation, awakening the dormant ambition buried beneath layers of daily routine. "Then let's start. Let's put paint to canvas, allow your perspective to spill into creation," Jonathan urged, his enthusiasm laying a bridge over her self-doubt. The notion boiled within her. Could this be the beginning of a different Martha, one who claimed her passion? But the churning excitement was accompanied by a growing knot of anxiety. The art world felt intimidating. What if her art didn't resonate with anyone? What if her attempts revealed limitations she had always feared? Yet, the thought of remaining mere background noise in her own life was an unbearable weight. As they stepped away from the vibrant painting, she noticed something peculiar. Other visitors were drawn to her, eyes flitting toward her as if trying to gauge her thoughts. She could feel their curiosity pressing in like a wave. Martha took a deep breath, acknowledging this realization. Here, in this moment of vulnerability, others were seeking connection. Perhaps it wasn't about being perfect or renowned. It was about engaging truthfully with oneself and letting that truth flow through to others. At that moment, she sensed an awakening. She could redefine what being an artist meant. It wasn't defined by success, but by the courage to express her unique vision, however imperfect. She imagined different canvases, each one telling a story, of joys and struggles, of triumph and abandonment. "What if I fail?" she questioned, the self-doubt pressing against her thoughts like a heavy fog. "Failing isn't the opposite of success, it's part of the journey," Jonathan replied, his words cutting through her fears. "The effort is what matters. The willingness to show up is what connects you to others." Martha felt a shift within her. Could she genuinely embrace the struggle? Could she shed the skin of expectation that had confined her for so long? The path wouldn't be simple, and the weight of responsibility loomed large. Yet, for the first time, she felt a flicker of possibility, a tiny flame that could guide her through the uncertainty. As they left the gallery, Martha resolved to start the next day. She wouldn't just dip a brush in paint, but would allow herself to immerse in the experience of creating. In her mind, visions of blank canvases filled with colors danced. The fear didn't vanish, but it transformed, becoming an exhilarating companion rather than a mercurial specter. As they walked along the quiet streets, she turned to Jonathan, her voice steady. "Will you promise to be honest with me, even if my first pieces are awful?" He chuckled softly, his demeanor warm. "Absolutely, but I don't expect awful. Just be authentic. That's what will resonate." Martha's heart swelled with determination, but a whisper of doubt bubbled under the surface. How far would this journey take her? What if she began to forge a new identity, only to realize she'd taken a wrong turn? As dusk descended, illuminating the path ahead, she felt her anxiety stir once again. The shadows of her past loomed near, waiting to pounce upon her uncertainty. She knew she was on the cusp of something great, yet the question remained, was she ready to confront both the beauty and the chaos within herself? Just beyond the glimmering streetlights, the world awaited, a canvas of its own. But Martha hesitated, her feet planted firmly, contemplating the depths of her own burgeoning ambition. How would she paint her life anew if she could scarcely envision the first stroke? The morning sun filtered through the window, casting a tapestry of warm light across the small room Martha had designated as her studio. The smell of turpentine mingled with the heady aroma of acrylic paint, igniting her senses with a newfound energy. Today was the day she had promised herself. No more hesitation, no more self-doubt. She would wield her brush like a sword, her canvas an arena of raw emotion and unfiltered expression. Martha stood before the blank canvas, the starkness of it both thrilling and paralyzing. The colors she had envisioned the night before flickered just beyond her grasp, elusive and teasing. She dipped her brush into a vibrant crimson, then hesitated. What would she create? What if the paint fell flat when juxtaposed against her expectations? What if her fears whispered their disapproval, drowning out her creative voice? She breathed deeply, recalling Jonathan's words, "Just be authentic." The phrase echoed in her mind, a mantra encouraging her to embrace the real Martha. The pressure of producing something beautiful weighed heavily on her shoulders, but she was beginning to grasp that beauty existed in the struggle. She didn't need to meet an arbitrary standard. She needed to expose her truth. With a sudden burst of resolve, she began to paint. The brush glided over the canvas, leaving thick, intentional strokes. Red mingled with blue, wild splashes appearing instinctively as memories of her life swirled through her mind. The frustrations, the moments of joy, the stifling expectations, all bled into the artwork, transforming an empty surface into a reflection of her complex existence. Minutes turned into hours, time seemed irrelevant. Martha stepped back and took in her creation. It wasn't flawless, but it was intensely alive. Each brushstroke bore a piece of her heart and soul. She leaned closer, examining the intricate dance between colors, feeling exhilarated yet vulnerable. The canvas told her story, a story she was just beginning to understand. But, of course, the rational side of her mind intruded, questioning the merit of her work. Was this merely childish splatter? Would anyone take her seriously as an artist? Just as doubt began to creep in, the image of Jonathan's encouraging smile floated to the surface of her thoughts. Stung by the thought of being judged, she remembered the warmth of honesty he had offered. It sparked an awakening within her, nudging her toward a critical realization. Validation, while desired, was not the purpose of creation. Art, like life, was inherently subjective. Her journey was not about accolades, but about personal growth and discovery. Determined to confront her fears head-on, she decided to invite Jonathan back to the studio. Sharing her progress would mean risking criticism, but it was also an opportunity for meaningful connection, the kind she had craved for so long. She mentally prepared herself to embrace any feedback with an open heart, transforming her anxiety into anticipation. As she picked up her phone, her hands trembled, not just with nervousness, but with a thrilling sense of empowerment. She was stepping into her own narrative, challenging the old stories that had kept her confined. The very act of reaching out for support resonated deeply within her, aligning her with her newfound ambition. With a quick call, she arranged for Jonathan to visit the following day. After hanging up, an exhilarated calm washed over her. The journey ahead felt daunting, yet a fire had been ignited within. The shadows of doubt loomed less ominously, and she believed, however lightly, that she could shape her own destiny. Yet, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the room grew dimmer, her canvas becoming an indistinct outline of color and emotion. Despite her courage, a whisper of fear lingered. What if Jonathan didn't react as she hoped? What if he couldn't see the depth she felt in her creation? The thought gripped her momentarily, pulling her back into conflicted territory. Her heart raced as she grappled with this internal turbulence. How much truth would she truly reveal? The canvas beckoned, but so did uncertainty. Tomorrow would mark her first test of authenticity, a reckoning with the very chaos she had long sought to transform. And in that singular moment of internal conflict, a new question emerged. Would she find strength in exposing her vulnerability, or would she retreat into old habits, doubting the resilience she had just begun to cultivate? The answer would define not just her art, but her evolving self. As dawn broke, the soft glow of morning filtered through the studio window, illuminating the remnants of last night's creative outpouring. Martha stood in front of her canvas, a medley of colors swirling around in a chaotic yet beautiful symphony. The wild enthusiasm from the previous day began to settle into a nervous anticipation. Today was not just about painting, it was about unveiling a part of herself she had long buried under layers of self-doubt and hesitation. Remembering her commitment to authenticity, she pulled on an old shirt splattered with paint and splashed water over her palette, blending the colors. Each stroke felt like breathing. The brush was an extension of her thoughts, a true expression of her inner chaos. But beyond her anticipation lay an undeniable fear. The impending meeting with Jonathan loomed heavier on her mind with each passing minute. With every brushstroke, she wrestled with her insecurities. What if he saw only the imperfections, the haphazardness? Her heart sank as she recalled the countless rejections she had experienced, the countless times she had crumbled under criticism. Dark thoughts threatened to engulf her, whispering that this was just another failed endeavor. Each passing moment filled her with doubt, challenging the foundation of her hard-won clarity. Then she paused, reflecting inwardly. Why was she so intent on others' validation? Jonathan's encouragement had opened her eyes to an unfamiliar approach, to create for herself, not for the opinions of others. It was a lesson she was still struggling to internalize. As she stood there contemplating, she grasped that the rawness she feared might just be the very essence of her art. With renewed determination, Martha began layering vibrant blues onto her canvas, intertwining them with strokes of bright yellow. It was an exhilarating release, as if she were peeling back the layers of her own constraints. The colors began to form shapes that felt familiar yet uncharted. A voice manifested, urging her to stop seeking perfection. Instead, she should embrace the messy beauty of life, the moments of uncertainty, vulnerability, and growth. Hours slipped by as she let the paint flow freely, losing herself in the rhythm of creation. Yet, as the time approached for Jonathan's arrival, a knot of anxiety twisted in her stomach. She cleaned up her brushes, feeling the heaviness of expectation settle back over her. Would he see the depth of her work? Would he understand the story woven into each brushstroke? Minutes before he was due, she strategically arranged her paints and tools, creating an innocent distraction for her nerves. But as the clock ticked closer to the hour, her heart raced with uncertainty. When the knock finally came, it reverberated in the silence of the room like a judge's gavel. She took a deep breath, willing her feet to carry her to the door. It wasn't just a door, it was a threshold between vulnerability and courage, past and present. Opening it, she was met with Jonathan's warm, expectant smile, an immediate source of comfort. "Hey, I'm excited to see what you've been working on," he said, stepping into the studio filled with sunlight and color. Martha's invitation to share her journey danced nervously on her lips, but as she motioned toward the canvas, the air grew heavy with unsaid emotions. She had prepared herself for feedback, but would she be ready for the validation of her choices? Before she could overthink, she blurted, "It's not finished, but it means a lot to me." As Jonathan took in the chaos of colors smeared across the canvas, Martha's heart raced. Would he grasp the essence of her work, or would he see only a novice's attempt? The answer was out of her control, and yet it would shape her understanding of herself as an artist. In that moment, Martha recognized that regardless of his response, her journey was hers alone. Each challenge faced, each fear conquered, paved the way to a more authentic self. But what lay ahead now, in the vein of constructive feedback, could either be the affirmation she craved, or a revelation that would challenge her resolve even further. Would Jonathan's evaluation validate her efforts, or would it uncover a haunting truth about her creative vulnerability? With a steady breath, Martha watched Jonathan's eyes scan the canvas, searching for meaning among the vivid chaos. For a fleeting moment, she felt suspended in time, as though the outcome of their discussion would not only define her work, but also reshape her identity as an artist. Her heart thudded. Every second stretched out, amplifying her anticipation. "Wow," Jonathan finally said, turning to her with genuine wonder. "This is extraordinary. The colors are so vivid, and there's a real energy here. What inspired you?" His enthusiasm struck a tender chord in her, yet a thread of anxiety still wound its way through her thoughts. "I wanted to break free from trying to create something perfect," she replied, surprising herself with her honesty. "To put what I feel onto the canvas instead of what I think other people want to see." "So, it's raw?" he suggested, nodding, encouraging her to delve deeper. "In a good way, of course." "Yes, I guess you could say that." Confidence flickered within her, igniting a sense of vindication she hadn't anticipated. As the words tumbled out, she felt a need to shield herself from the vulnerability that came with being seen. "But I'm still not sure if it's enough. I worry it's just a mess." Jonathan stepped closer, examining details she had overlooked. "Art isn't just about the outcome, Martha. It's about the journey. Your journey, the feelings you poured into every stroke, that's what makes it powerful. For the first time, she perceived her work through his eyes. Maybe she didn't need to sculpt every detail into an idealized image. Perhaps authenticity manifested not only in the piece itself, but also in how it came to life through her experiences, each brushstroke telling a chapter of her narrative. As he continued to critique, she found herself absorbing his words, no longer defensively wrapped in fear, but willingly opening her mind to constructive feedback. "You have so much potential," he offered, a light in his voice. "I see this piece as part of something even grayer. You have the ability to spin your own story into something unique." Stepping back, Jonathan's appreciation steered her thoughts. It wasn't just about approval, it was about evolution. His encouragement felt like a nudge toward a new horizon. She could craft art that spoke to her on a different level, that resonated with others. With renewed resolve, Martha pondered the challenges ahead. The art world was notoriously fickle, and while the prospect of creating more pieces that aligned with her genuine self was thrilling, it also ignited a familiar unease. Would she still be able to navigate the judgment and potential rejection that followed? "So, what's your next step?" Jonathan asked, breaking her reverie. "You've clearly tapped into a side of yourself that's outspoken and raw. Don't let it slip away now." The reality of his question reverberated in her chest. What did that path look like? The thought of showcasing her uncertain journey in a gallery paralyzed her momentarily. Neither the fear of criticism nor the uncertainty of her artistic ability could overshadow the allure of pouring everything she was into her artwork. "I think I want to explore this sensation further, but I'm scared, Jonathan. What if I fail?" "There's no failing here," he assured her, a mixture of warmth and certainty in his eyes. "Only learning. Embrace the fear. Let it guide you." Martha considered his words intently. Becoming an artist meant embracing risk, not only through her creations, but also through her willingness to confront her deepest fears. But could she do this alone? The thought of collaborative opportunities flickered in her mind, a question lingering about creating alongside others who shared similar wavelengths of vulnerability. "Are you still open to exhibiting this work?" he asked, seemingly reading her thoughts as anticipation filled the air. "Think about it. Imagine how connecting authentically with others could be transformative, not just for you, but for them too." Jonathan's proposition hung before her like a tantalizing invitation, encapsulating every possibility and every fear intertwined. As she met his eyes, a flood of determination surged through her again. This was her moment to step forward into the unknown, not retreat into the comfort of fear. Martha realized that the real challenge would not simply be about displaying her work, but unveiling her creative self. The stakes were now clear. To thrive as the artist she aspired to be, she needed to push through the fear of failure and venture into unfamiliar territory. "Maybe I will," she replied slowly, the possibility grounding her, "but I'll need help to figure out the next step." And as they discussed how to bring her art to a wider audience, something inside her cracked open. Their conversation drifted towards themes of collaboration and expression, each moment pregnant with potential realization. But just as clarity began to bloom, another wave of uncertainty pressed at the edges of her consciousness. How would she face the inevitable critiques? Drawing a deep breath, Martha realized that the threshold she stood before did not merely lead to opportunity, but also to countless moments of discovery. And just as the vision of her future began to take shape, a message pinged on Jonathan's phone, interrupting the flow of their dialogue and sending a shiver of apprehension down her spine. It was a single word: urgent. What could it possibly mean for them both? The sound of Jonathan's phone pierced the moment, a jarring reminder that life outside her artistic cocoon was still buzzing. He glanced at the screen, his brows furrowing slightly. Martha felt a wave of anxiety wash over her, an instinctual retreat from vulnerability creeping back in. She had finally begun to unearth the core of her artistic voice, and now the universe threatened to jolt her back into silence. "What is it?" Martha asked, her tone almost a whisper. "I need to take this," Jonathan said, his voice clipped. He stepped a few feet away, already lost in whatever unfolding drama awaited him on the other end of the line. Martha's heart raced, the silence enveloping her like a heavy cloak. She turned her attention to the canvas, now filled with a cacophony of shapes and colors that felt both familiar and alien. Each brushstroke housed a fragment of her revelations and fears, yet they blurred before her eyes. In his absence, she wrestled with her insecurities. What if he never returned to continue their discussion? What if her courage flickered out without his encouragement? The urgency of his call echoed in her mind, leaving her fidgeting next to the vibrant chaos she had created. Trying to steady her thoughts, she considered what Jonathan had said about embracing fear. Could she channel this disruption into creation? Could it push her further into her own artistic complexities? With a deep breath, Martha allowed herself to explore the notion of vulnerability. What if she leaned into the anxiety that twisted her gut? What if she translated it onto the canvas? A spark ignited within her. She scrambled for a fresh brush, intrigued by the prospect of pouring this new wave of emotion onto her work. She began swiping bold strokes across the canvas, letting her hand be guided by instinct rather than thought. Just as she lost herself in this process, Jonathan returned, the urgency of his conversation still hanging in the air. She sensed his presence before she saw him, the warmth radiating from him. "Sorry about that. It was just a family matter. How's the new piece coming along?" Martha hesitated, struggling to articulate the wild amalgamation of colors that now danced before her. "It's raw," she finally said, echoing his earlier assessment. "I tried to capture the feelings stirred by the uncertainty of it all." Jonathan stepped closer, studying her progress. "That's exactly what you need to do," he said, excitement returning to his tone. "Keep pushing those boundaries. Don't let anything silence your journey." His words enveloped her in encouragement, prompting a rush of clarity. Each stroke of her brush was imbued with not just fear, but also resilience. If she embraced this chaotic pull, she could wield fear as a transformative tool. Perhaps she didn't need to excel in everything, but rather engage with it on a deeper emotional level. "What if I created a series?" she mused aloud, the idea crystallizing in her mind. "A body of work that illustrates raw emotions, each piece linked to a specific memory or feeling." Jonathan nodded vigorously, a smile breaking across his face. "Absolutely, it would show incredible growth, your growth. It's a journey that doesn't shy from discomfort, but welcomes it." Martha felt exhilaration wash over her, edging out the last remnants of self-doubt. They brainstormed about further developing the concept, each idea sparking fresh inspiration. But amidst the clarity of their collaboration, the question of public reception loomed heavily. Would her audience embrace this fearless exploration of vulnerability, or would they reject it as an incomprehensible mess? Yet, for the first time, the possibility of rejection felt less daunting. She understood now that her worth didn't hinge solely upon acceptance. It was about authenticity, forging a pathway through the uncomfortable. "What if we scheduled a preview?" Jonathan suggested, a spark of mischief lighting his eyes. "Get feedback from a select group before you exhibit." The thought sent a rush of adrenaline through her. Testing the waters before diving into the deep end felt exhilarating and terrifying. "But what if they hate it?" she countered. "Then you learn. This is your moment, Martha. Embrace it," he replied. At that moment, Martha realized she stood on the brink of something profound. This wasn't just a journey into art, it was a reclaiming of her narrative. But as excitement churned within her, a thought niggled at the back of her mind. Was she truly prepared for the scrutiny, and how would it affect her personal relationships moving forward? The phone buzzed on the table. Jonathan's expression changed as he glanced at the incoming message, a shadow crossing his face. "I'll be right back," he said, leaving her with a burgeoning sense of both anticipation and trepidation. As he stepped away again, she felt a familiar sense of urgency in her chest. Would this next conversation, this decision, propel her into a realm of artistic freedom, or would it chain her to fear once more? The moment hung suspended, vibrant yet fragile, as Martha teetered on the edge of commitment. Without the comfort of Jonathan's steady presence, she faced the choice that could change everything. The question lingered, electrifying the air. How would she respond when the time for her debut finally arrived? Martha stood in the gallery-like space of her studio, the remnants of her earlier creativity buzzing within her. The vibrant strokes of paint had transformed into a multicolored tapestry of her emotions, each hue echoing something unsaid. Jonathan had left her with questions that spiraled through her mind like the colors on her canvas. But now, alone, she felt the weight of impending vulnerability pressing down on her. She fidgeted, adjusting the blanket of texture she had just created, each brushstroke feeling both liberating and perilous. The prospect of unveiling her work was daunting, but the fear that had stalked her for years had begun to recede, replaced by a burgeoning sense of purpose. Perhaps her journey into the deep waters of her emotions could be a deliverance rather than a drowning. In the productive silence, thoughts surfaced unfiltered. What if her art finally resonated with that part of herself she had kept hidden? What if her audience could identify with the emotions laid bare on the canvas? The other side of insecurity began to shimmer tantalizingly, an invisible bridge to artistic freedom. For every ounce of hesitant doubt, she discovered a wellspring of determination. This was about more than acceptance. It was about reclamation. Still, doubts remained, flickering near the edges of her resolve. How would she handle the intimate intersections of her art and personal life? Would the scrutiny she longed for taint the relationship she valued? As she considered these questions, she acknowledged the underlying fear of judgment from those she cared for most. They had always been a safe harbor, shielding her from the storms of critique, but now she felt her artistic pulse slipping away into uncharted territory. With a vibrant palette surrounding her, Martha set her jaw as she picked up her brush. The strokes began to guide her once more, each sweep across the canvas pushing against the walls of her inhibitions. Maybe Jonathan was right. There was something transformative about facing her fears head-on. Art, after all, had often been a mirror reflecting her internal struggles, but perhaps it was time to become the driving force behind her own narrative. The interlude of Jonathan's absence unraveled like a tether to the outside world. She had lost track of time while immersed in her creative flow, but now she felt the urgency of the preview looming, pulsating in the spaces between her thoughts. The idea of gathering individuals to witness her raw unveiling was both exhilarating and suffocating. Could she combine this moment of artistic expression with a deeper understanding of herself? What would it mean for her identity? She realized it was time to crystallize her intentions, to craft her narrative not merely with paint, but with conviction and pride. With that thought, her brush met the canvas anew, this time with a clearer vision, each merging layer representing her evolving self. Impulse gripped her, and she hastily crafted a list. She leaned into the urge, wanting to enlist trusted friends and fellow artists for the preview. Each name she scribbled across the page represented a facet of her life she wanted to integrate into her art. Yet nestled beneath the excitement lay an undercurrent of trepidation. The juxtaposition of celebration and vulnerability felt intoxicating. The door clicked softly, and Jonathan returned, the small screen of his phone illuminating the room momentarily before he looked at her. In that instant, she felt an undeniable urge to share her plans, a flicker of confidence that momentarily quieted her fears. But was this the right time? Anxiety rippled through her as she scanned his expression. "Martha," he began, breaking the tension in the air, "I got some news." The sentence hung suspended between them, a promise with an underlying weight that sent her heart racing. The urgency of the moment clamored for her attention. Was this news about the preview, or something that might pull them both deeper into uncertainty? Martha's breath caught, teeth biting at her lip as she awaited his next words. What would this revelation mean for her journey, and could it shatter the fragile equilibrium she had begun to forge? The layers of her own narrative were now inextricably linked with Jonathan's presence. With everything at stake, she found herself bracing for the unknown, aware that her true transformation could be just about to unfold. How would she respond when reality collided with her aspirations, and could she protect the deepest parts of herself when those aspirations took flight? The tremor of anticipation hung in the air between them as Jonathan gathered his thoughts, a pause that felt like both an eternity and a fleeting moment of clarity. "I got a call about a possible show for your work," he said, his eyes sparkling with excitement and seriousness at the same time. "And they want to see your pieces in action. It's a local gallery, and they're looking for fresh, authentic voices." Martha's breath hitched, a rush of emotions cascading through her, exhilaration and terror wrapped tightly together. The swirling colors of her canvas reflected her inner chaos. What did this really mean? Could her art, the very parts of herself she had deemed unworthy, be validation in a public light? "Are they sure they want to see my work?" she murmured, incredulous. "What if it's too raw or not refined enough?" Doubt seeped through her, clawing for space in her newfound confidence. Jonathan stepped closer, his tone soothing yet firm. "They want authenticity, Martha. It's what you're creating. Losing oneself to perfectionism can bury the truth of your journey. This is an opportunity for you to stand in the light you've been hesitant to step into." His emphasis on authenticity fed the flickering flame of determination within her. The idea of it, a show, her name associated with art, evoked a sense of potential she hadn't even imagined aloud. "Are they sure they want to see my work?" she murmured, incredulous. "What if it's too raw or not refined enough?" Doubt seeped through her, clawing for space in her newfound confidence. Jonathan stepped closer, his tone soothing yet firm. "They want authenticity, Martha. It's what you're creating. Losing oneself to perfectionism can bury the truth of your journey. This is an opportunity for you to stand in the light you've been hesitant to step into." His emphasis on authenticity fed the flickering flame of determination within her. The idea of it, a show, her name associated with art, evoked a sense of potential she hadn't even imagined aloud. Just months ago, she was scrubbing floors. Now, the thought of having her work critiqued in a space dedicated to creativity filled her with thrilling anxiety. "I want that, Jonathan, more than anything, but the fear of judgment is suffocating. What if no one connects with what I've created?" Martha's voice quavered, her pulse pounding in her ears. "Remember what you said before, the struggle, the rawness. It's what makes your work powerful. Art is a mirror. Your reflection resonates with others because we all have the same raw edges. The key is sharing that journey. You are not just an artist. You are a storyteller." As his words washed over her, they ignited a profound realization. The fear she felt was not just fear of judgment. It was fear of unveiling her vulnerability, of inviting others into her narrative. Could this new chapter allow her to embody the truth of her being, to live fully as the artist she aspired to become? "If they see me, if they feel me," she whispered into the stillness, "will they understand?" Jonathan nodded, his expression unwavering. If they are willing to engage with your work, they will understand. This is your chance to connect authentically with them. It can be transformational for you and for your audience. Her hands trembled slightly. Exhilaration mingled with trepidation coursed through her. The prospect of an exhibition ignited a latent courage she thought she lost. Would it be a triumphant breakthrough or a painful exposure? Either way, it was clear that her journey had reached a pivotal moment, one in which she could no longer linger in the wings of other people's narratives. "Let's do it." The words tumbled out of her mouth, trembling with newfound resolve. "I want to show them who I am, where I've been, and where I want to go. This is my chance to redefine my story." Jonathan's eyes sparkled, palpable excitement radiating from him. "Excellent! Then I'll help you with the preparations. We can create something that not only speaks to you, but resonates with everyone who walks in." Martha could feel herself shifting, shaking off the constraints of self-doubt and stepping boldly into the light of possibility. This was not merely about showcasing skill, but about vulnerability and openness. Her existence as an artist was not a solitary venture anymore. It was an invitation for connection. As they brainstormed ideas and preparations, Martha felt the panic of judgment subside, replaced by a bubbling enthusiasm. They mapped out a plan for the exhibition, discussing her vision and how each piece would convey her journey. Layers of struggle, illustrated with bold colors and raw strokes. In doing so, Martha began to see how art was more than just paint. It was a narrative, a living testament to her evolution. In the days leading up to the exhibition, she painted feverishly, each canvas a testament to her tempests and triumphs. The vibrant strokes began to tell a cohesive story, one of resilience, vulnerability, and hope. The day of the exhibition arrived, and as she stood before her work, a tide of emotions came crashing in. The gallery space buzzed with chatter, a flurry of energy combining admiration and curiosity. She felt exposed yet invigorated as strangers stepped closer to peer at the story she had imbued into every piece. When Jonathan walked in, he immediately sought her out, a proud smile lighting his face. "Look at this! People are talking about your work. They're connecting with your story, Martha." Heart pounding, she absorbed the vibrant exchange around her. A person paused before her canvas of tumultuous reds and calming blues. Another nodded thoughtfully at the pieces echoing her struggles. She didn't just see viewers, she saw connections being made, reflections of her own journey vividly resonating in others. As conversations flourished, each dialogue with visitors opened a door into her heart. They saw her rawness and strength, and in them she saw reflections of themselves. "That piece, what does it mean?" a woman asked, eyes glistening as she gazed deeply into the work. "It embodies my journey through fear to embracing my voice," Martha found herself saying, summoning the words as if they'd always been within her. "Art is a way for me to communicate the parts of my life I once felt ashamed of sharing." The woman nodded, her expression softening. "That resonates with me. I've struggled with feeling seen too." In that moment, the synthesis of her fear and courage, Martha realized the power of her art. This wasn't merely a display of her work, it was a celebration of identity, an invitation for connection on a profoundly human level. As the event carried on, the validation Martha had once sought became less important than the shared experiences unfolding before her. Each conversation etched a firm resilience in her heart. In the aftermath of the exhibition, as she reflected on her journey, Martha felt an overwhelming sense of pride. She had transformed her vulnerabilities into a tapestry of art and connection. Her name, once tied solely to her past roles, now resonated with resilience, creativity, and agency. Martha didn't just showcase her work, she conquered her deepest fears. With each brushstroke, she proved to herself that she belonged here, that her voice mattered, and that her story was worthy of being shared. Just as importantly, she also realized that she was no longer just Jonathan Green's maid, but was someone deserving of recognition and fulfillment in her own right. As the echoes of the exhibition faded, she understood this was not the end, but a new beginning. Her journey into artistry was alive, and she was eager for the next chapter. With a solid confidence blossoming within her, she picked up her brush, ready to continue exploring the depths of her creativity, embracing the richness of her evolving story. And in doing so, she embodied the truth that she had spent so long searching for. Every stroke of authenticity, every layer of strength, and every splash of color represented not just art, but her flourishing self. This was her moment, and she would never again allow the world to keep her from embracing it. Now, if you've been inspired by Martha's transformative journey, this is the moment to show your support. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that unfold and captivate. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and amplify these powerful narratives. Comment your reactions and theories about how Martha embraced her fears and flourished. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this remarkable conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to help spread these stories of personal overcoming.